Did you know that 1 in 6 people in the UK suffer with anxiety, and 79% of those are work-related stress and anxiety? That's a pretty high number and a pretty high correlation with work. Stress. How does this affect our body? What happens in our body? In our tissues, we have what we call hydrogen ions. And these little hydrogen ions are constantly sitting, let's say in your bum, for example, and they will slowly drip through your nerves up to your brain. And they'll say, hey, your bum's here today. Hey, you're sitting on your bum. I think you've sat on it a bit too long. Let's move. Okay. Now, when we're stressed, our nerves become more permeable. So they become more like a sponge, which means that those hydrogen ions that sit, say, in your bum muscle actually have more ability to get into the nerve. So now all of a sudden, instead of 1 coming up, you've got like 10 coming through, and they go, hey, hello, did you know that you're sitting on your bum today? And did you know that you've sat there a bit too long? And now I'm gonna make you ache now. So now let's say you have an underlying niggle, maybe in your lower back. When you're then stressed, that amplifies that pain from that area. From what we've said before, more hydrogen ions are coming back from that area up to your brain to say, here is the issue. And so it's not necessarily that the pain has suddenly got worse, but your brain is receiving more information from that area. So that area is now heightened in your awareness. Now let's take our 2 systems in the body. You've got your sympathetic and your parasympathetic. They're all part of what we call the autonomic nervous system. So your nervous system. One of them represents your fight or your flight. So let's stand up to something or let's run away from that tiger. The other one represents the rest and digest. So that's when we actually do most of our healing in that phase. If one of those systems is heightened and the other one is down here, then this is when you're going to have a lot more stress and anxiety. But those systems are there for a reason. Obviously, sometimes we do need to run away from that tiger, or we do need to rest and digest and relax. And what we want is for those 2 systems to be balanced. That's what we're aiming for. So when someone is very stressed or anxious, quite often that fight-flight system is up here and that rest and digest is down here. So guess what? The way to balance them is to stimulate this rest and digest down here, and that automatically brings this one down. When we're stressed, our breathing can become more shallow and rapid. That can affect the diaphragm. Now, the diaphragm is one of our breathing muscles, and it comes up and through and attaches to all of this rib cage, even at the back here. And it also has some really important connections that come through the middle, including arteries that go to your heart, veins that come away from your heart, but also your stomach comes up through the diaphragm. So you can imagine, if that diaphragm is now becoming more tight, more shallow and rapidly as you're breathing, then that can actually pull your stomach up and cause symptoms like acid reflux or heartburn. Then in turn, because this diaphragm is so tight, it then can lead to issues like constipation, because in fact your diaphragm is used to massage your bowels. That is one of its jobs, indirectly. So if this stress causes this pulling up, you get anxious up here, you get the heartburn, you get the indigestion, you get the constipation, and you get the acid reflux, among many other symptoms. So for us as physical therapists, it's really important for us to work on your breathing and to work on these organs that have got tight and potentially over many years have become tight, and you've got used to breathing up here in this level rather than down into your belly or out into the rib cage and even out into the back area. Other symptoms you may experience can be palpitations. And the reason for that is because your heart sits roughly in this region. And again, it's close to that diaphragm. So if that diaphragm again is compromised, it's not allowing your lungs to descend and fill, it will also be putting compression through the heart. And the heart's a muscle, so it likes to breathe, it likes to have space. All of these organs here love to have space. And if anything's tight or sticky, they can't move properly. And so the heart, its way of talking to you is by giving you a palpitation. Amongst that, if your lungs are not able to descend and fill, that means you're not going to get as much oxygen into your system, which means that you'll feel more fatigued. Your muscles won't feel like they can work as good as they used to. But also it means that this guy up here, the brain, he won't get as much oxygen, which means you won't sleep so well. And then you can end up with that tired but wired approach. Cortisol is our stress hormone, and it's released from our kidneys. So if your kidneys are constantly pushing out cortisol, that can lead you into what we call adrenal fatigue. Now you've heard about your adrenals and being lively and ready to do things, and so they're there for a reason. They're there to spruce you up and get going, let's do this. But you don't want that constantly. You don't want that constantly firing as if you're going to run away from something or you're ready to take on something. And that's when you can get adrenal fatigue. Alongside that, cortisol, the stress hormone, also fights for the same receptor site as progesterone. Progesterone is the hormone we need for fertility as females. And it will overtake because it's more important, our brain thinks it's more important to actually survive than it is to reproduce. So if you're struggling with fertility, it could be to do with stress hormones. And so lowering and dampening that effects, again with that rest and digest, you can improve your chances of fertility. This also applies to men. Again, when your body is in that survival mode, the blood will run to the muscles so that you can run away from something or you can fight something. It's not going to bring your blood to the area to reproduce. Treating stress and anxiety is not something that you associate generally with a physio or an osteopath. You think of physios as treating a sporting injury, or an osteopath treating clicking your bones. And actually, we can help to treat the stress and anxiety. And we do that by stimulating that parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and digest. And to do that, we work with those internal organs. And this is called visceral therapy. We work to release the diaphragm. We work to stimulate the bowels, to stimulate the vagus nerve. We even work with the cranial nerves. The osteopaths more so. And when we work on those tissues, we work on those nerves to dampen that fight and that flight situation, which then brings you into that harmony and that balance. We also use things like dry needling. Dry needling works with your system. The fact of a needle going into your body tells your brain, get ready for pain. And that sends endorphins to that area. That in itself will make you feel more and more relaxed. Then we can target specific muscles that have become extremely tight. And that needle going into those muscles makes the muscle go bleh, like jelly. And this enables you to move better. So imagine if you come to us and we loosen your rib cage. Now your lungs can expand. You can get more oxygen in. Now your diaphragm can lengthen and allow the lungs to descend. Again, bringing more oxygen in. These are just some of the things that we work with to stimulate your system to work at its optimum. Our muscles and cartilage have memory. So you can imagine, after we've treated you and we've loosened your diaphragm, we've loosened those tissues that have been tight for so long, they will have a tendency to go back into their old positions again. Because let's face it, they've been there for years, or they've been there for a long time, and they can't understand why they're in a different position. So we have to re-educate them. We have to reteach them how to move. But that also means us reteaching your brain too, and how your body needs to move and how you need to activate again now. So then after a treatment, it's good to have a follow-up, and have a follow-up fairly soon so that we can maintain what we've optimized in your body. Then after a few sessions after that, then you can space out the sessions and eventually not need to have the treatment again, because you've learned how to use your body in the right way again. As well as receiving treatment from a physio or an osteopath, there's actually a lot of things you can do yourself. Watch this video for more physical releases that you can do at home all by yourself. Also, there are other tips. For example, eating little and often. This puts less pressure on your stomach. Then you can do things like eating breakfast. I know a lot of people when they're stressed, they don't eat breakfast. But the thing is, your stomach actually produces more stomach acid in the morning. So it's actually really important, even if it's just something small like an apple or a banana, to actually put that in and to calm those tissues and calm those juices that are there that want to do something. This will reduce the amount of acidity, the amount of acid reflux or the heartburn that you may experience. Another thing you can do is keep a thought diary. Now this is something that challenges your thoughts. For example, you can write down, I've got neck pain. And what's the thought behind that? I feel like my head is going to fall off. And how stressed do you feel about that? I feel 70% stressed about that. And if there are any other feelings you feel about that, worried, I don't know, 20% worried. Then you start to challenge that thought and you go, okay, what's the evidence for that my head is going to fall off? Well, Google said so. Then the next column, what's the evidence against that? When I went to see the health professional, they reassured me that this is not the case. Then you go back to your original, my neck pain, and how do you feel about that now? How stressed do you feel about that now? And instead of being that 70%, you may now be at 20%. And your emotions may have changed. This is a really great way to challenge your thoughts.